we just decided the word was becoming meaningless. Let's take it away from Green New Deal. And it's not just about greenness anyway. This is about more than that. So the other thing that we took with the name was a very important point, which is an awful lot of the top conversation around matters environmental end up being about finger pointing and blaming individuals. So the first thing that we did in this is we said, you can't do this yourself. It's not your fault. No matter how much you tried, reducing your environmental impact to zero or getting it positive is virtually impossible for virtually everybody. This is a system problem. It's a structural problem. It is a common problem. It's a common problem to our communities, to our nation, and to the world. And it can only be fixed with common solutions. So there was a reason why we said our common home. We had no idea the Pope was going to come and nick the bloody name, which was a bit unfortunate. So I must say we now do tend to focus on the common home plan as the branding. But I'll tell you about where that's going next in a second. So the very simples about this, which you might not know, is just our approach. So first, everything in this will involve nobody else putting a hand in a pocket. There is no co-payment involved in this. This project will do every house, all the energy. No one is then going to have to be told and your bill is. So this is all-inclusive collective work. It is not about climate change. It's about all the environmental crises. So we identified the 7 basic environmental crises, and we quite quickly said there's no point in tackling climate change if we keep hammering on with plastic pollution. So we said that we were going to make an assessment of all 7, their impact in Scotland, Scotland's impact on them, and we were going to tackle them all. So the whole lot of them, because we're nothing if not ambitious. We also decided that we wanted to do this, and this is the next incredibly difficult thing that we did. But quite quickly we decided it doesn't really count if we just deal with the impact of our lifestyles in Scotland. So another thing that bothers me about Green New Deals is an awful lot of them do tend to come from a kind of, I don't know, I would call it globalization sympathetic approach, or at least multinational sympathetic. And there's an assumption that this is being done in the context of global change. I don't think that's going to happen. I don't think that's realistic. I think it's a responsibility for each of us to take responsibility for what we are doing, irrespective of where those impacts are. So we said, no, this is not just about what happens in Scotland. If we're dumping environmental harm on the global south, then we've got to stop that too. It's about stopping, it's about reducing Scotland's impact, not in Scotland, but on the globe to zero, actually getting it positive. So that means we can't just turn a blind eye to importing fruits that are causing a collapse in the water table in places around the world which are going to leave them barren and desolate and no longer fertile for the local communities. Now that's a big ask. Fixing all 7 was difficult, fixing all 7 everywhere. I mean, we can't quite do it yet, certainly not yet. But we wanted to try because everything else felt hypocritical. So it's quite ambitious that way as well. The next point was that this is the whole purpose of this. The reason that we did it was we started kind of early spring last year. And the reason that we did it was I'm a big believer that there is no point in talking about principles if you can't get past that onto specifics. So holes don't dig themselves. Saying that we would like to decarbonise heating is all very well, but how? How are you going to do it? So what we said was it had to take everything on in detail and it had to be costed. So we had to, there's nothing in this when we're going, well, we need to do it, but we don't know how, apart from aviation. I don't have the time to talk about that. But with everything else, we're saying we know how to do this. It's also important to say that there was some things that we tried to avoid, which I think are trickeries of the environmental discussion. So number one, with a tiny, tiny number of exceptions, nothing is based on a technology which is not proven. So it's just this idea that we might start a proof of concept phase on a solution, which we could then roll out into a pilot and then evaluate and then bring back in and then develop into a proper plan and then roll out at scale. Well, we're dead by that point. So if it doesn't work, we don't use it. Transport's one of the few areas where that's not the case. So everything in this is existing technology. So we set a bunch of these principles early on, and I'll put my hand up and say at this point, I sat down and I thought, Jesus, what have we done here? I wasn't even sure this could be done. So I've got to put my hand up and say I am absolutely delighted that it can. With the exception of aviation, there's a theoretical approach to deal with everything here. So what we then did was, we worked with so many people in this one, experts in their specific fields. And the methodologies that we used to deliver this were particularly looking for case studies of examples of this being done at scale. Now, this is another tricky one, which is because we are talking about an entire system, an entire economy change, there were areas in which the existing experiential information is not its system. So there was I'll give you an example of that, which was that if you go and look at the literature on agroecology, a shift to agroecology, it's persuasive as long as you're talking at the scale of a farm. Because if you look in detail, an awful lot of them, when you dig down, the business case is predicated on that farm moving up to the premium end of the market. And that it proves that it can work for a farm, but that doesn't prove it can work for an entire economy, entire agriculture system. So what we did was we tried to look for things which were directly comparable. And hands up, we haven't solved agriculture, we've just explained how to do it. We've taken an estimate of what it would cost. But with everything else, I mean, we've really found very explicit comparators. So I suspect people might ask me about why we went for district heating. So I'm not going to tell you just now. You can ask me if you want. The short version is you try and do it any other way. Anyway, it was by far the hardest thing to solve is decarbonising heating, by far. So what we did was we came to a district heating system. We created ways of measuring this, which are saying, right, okay, we know where this has been done. We know how many units it covered, so we can derive a unit price and then we can multiply. So we know how much it costs to connect a house to a district heating system. We know how much it costs to put in a ring main. We know how much it costs to put in the heat generation capacity. So we did all the calculations. How much heat capacity do we need? What form of heat capacity do we need? How do we generate it? What's the heat balance? What's the budget, the heat budget? And then knowing that, we were able to price everything up, and we really did. We priced solar thermal versus all the other technologies. I talk about heating too much, so let me move on. What that did was it gave us, took us to a position where we weren't quite able to tell you exactly how many pipes and how many holes, but we weren't a long way away from that. What it did was it gave us a funding model, a way to cost this whole thing. So we've done that. To get wall to wall all the way through this and achieve it all, it's going to be about £175 billion. That's the total bill for this. No additional money after that. That's it. So how's the affordability of that? It sounds like a big number, or it did when we were doing it. These days, that sounds like chicken feed with the virus and all that. But what is it affordable? Yes, it is. So what we did was obviously it wouldn't be done this way, but we tried to work out what it would cost to repay it if you borrowed all 175 billion in day one. Should have said as well that, and I suspect I'll get some questions on this too, we're not doing this by IPCC target dates because we can't. Now, we can do a lot, we can get an enormous amount there, but this is the other thing that we looked at. There are very, very serious bottlenecks here. You cannot start really tackling the house insulation problem until you've got about another 5,000 joiners from out the blue. You can't do it without them. And there's a lot of supply. There's a lot of labour force bottlenecks, and there's also a phenomenal amount of surveying and project management to get this shovel ready. So I spent a good few hours with the Danish embassy's district heating expert, and like some sad sack, all I sat there was saying, "What's your lead times? What's your lead times? What's your lead times?" So this is not target driven. That was the other reason we did this. Enough targets, folks. If we're still setting targets, we're all screwed. Way past target time. The target is 0. That's it. There's no question. The target is 0. So what we then did was came at this a different way, which is simply how quickly can we do this? And we think probably the housing and district heating, well, no, the housing and district heating that's going to take the longest. That's going to be the hardest to implement. And our model says you can do it in 25 years. Again, you can do most of it first. You get most of it done before that, but it takes 25 years. So financing, we imagined it was being borrowed in year 1, 175 billion in year 1, and we financed it over 50 years. So again, you all get this, but you don't do this twice. The world's oldest district heating system, functioning district heating system, is over 100 years old. Our grandchildren's grandchildren's grandchildren will be living with the heating system we put in here if we even nearly do it right. So we're saying 1 generation to do it, 2 generations to pay for it. So financing this over 50 years comes to, even with very modest assumptions, comes to about £5 billion a year. So about £5 billion a year for Scotland to pay for this. But of course, it's a massive economic stimulus. So what we also did was we ran it through the standard model of the Scottish economy, the IO model, to kind of work out what the growth this would create, or what tax growth this would create. It's not about growth, obviously. And the problem, I should say as well, the problem with that is you can't really do it. So the Scottish input-output model is really there to say, here's the Scottish economy, change one thing. And so we went in and we said, no, we're changing everything. We can't really do it. So what we did was we just took some modest assumptions about some of it. So even very, very, very conservatively, this expenditure will generate an additional £4 billion a year in tax revenue by creating 100,000 additional jobs. So that's now a gap of about £1 billion a year. However, by the end of our plan, Scotland would have taken its entire energy system into collective ownership with one national energy company. Now that itself generates another £2.5 billion a year in electricity bills. So already, there's a number of other areas where we've taken revenue generation back in-house again, but already on that basis, it's costing us £5 billion and we're generating £6.5 billion. So the question isn't, can we afford it? The question is, what do you want to do with the extra billions? And that's really the thing we've got to message here. This is not unachievable, far from it. This will actually work. Now, David's kind of given you a run through of the sections, because what they then did was we just took all the problems, we kept mounting the problems up and then mounting the solutions up, and then we started to group them. So it came out in these 10 sections, which, again, just from memory, it goes housing, heating, electricity, transport, food, land, resources, trade. Now that one, again, some of you may want to ask me about that one because it's quite controversial, because we're actually saying, no, we can't just expect unregulated free trade. That unregulated free trade is the environmental crisis. And so we picked trade, we picked learning because there are bucket loads of training, development and learning, which was a separate section. And finally, because we're nothing if not evangelical, our last section is called Us, in which we propose how to change the human soul at a Scotland level. But genuinely, how we move from a world in which we value each other based on consumption to a world in which we value each other based on contribution and participation. And we've got solid proposals for every single bit of this. Okay, so that's what we did. I don't think I can do any more for you there, because with you lot, if I start going into any element of how we solved any one of these problems, you're going to start asking me detailed questions about it, which is great, but that'll take about a week. So what now? Let's just assume that you've got a rough idea about the shape of the content of this. What now? Okay.
You've got 3 minutes.
Yeah. That's where we come into the post-virus situation. The second the virus kicked off, being cynical or opportunistic or whatever you want, we immediately knew that this is a resilience plan. Now, the reason we knew that is because one of the things that came through as we were doing this, And this was controversial. I mean, I'm not joking you. I had an argument with an environmentalist about the global food supply chains. And he was telling me, you're talking rubbish, global food supply chains are incredibly resilient and we're never going to have any problems with them, which surprised me. But because it was clearly not true. There's a massive vulnerability in these long supply chains. There's a massive vulnerability in the availability of global resources and their decline. And we kept saying, look, it doesn't really matter what is going to cause the shock. It could be another financial crisis. It could be a virus. We were actually talking about the problem of a virus. It could be the first of the environmental crises that come to kick. It could be a fight over resources, but international stability can't be assumed in a world of climate change. Now, that was controversial a while ago. Nobody now disagrees. So what we were sitting there saying was, well, this was always about resilience. This was about doing a hell of a lot more of what needs to be done domestically. And in particular, it's heavily based around the concept of green import substitution reindustrialization, one of the most ungainly expressions ever, but really important. This is where you see we cannot make everyone else do things right, but we can do more of it ourselves instead of buying damaging things from other places. That's really at the heart of some of this. Now, that also gives us a really strong reindustrialization model for Scotland. Creates a whole series of industry sectors. I have become evangelical about advanced wood manufacture and bioplastics. I know folks know this, but I show everyone it. So there we go. That's I can't break that. It's a pen holder that my head of policy, Craig, 3D printed in his Susie's cell. That's entirely cellulose. So that's a bioplastic. It will compost. Scotland has the highest potential. You know this. Scotland has the lowest level of forestry in Europe, highest potential for the development of forestry. This is Scotland's future. Scotland's future lies in harnessing the natural resources that we have to make the things that we consume in a respectable manner. Anyway, in an ethical manner. Right, so when the virus hit, we obviously said, right, well, there's now going to be a fight for Scotland's future. You can see it playing out. After dealing with the economic crisis is currently a process of just doling out money to lobbyists. That's all they're doing, and everybody kind of knows it. And most people that really know these things know it's not going to work. Once we've given all the money to these lobbyists, their businesses are still going to be either viable or not viable at the end of it, and a lot of this money is just going to be wasted. We try to stop it, but I mean, it will happen like that. So the question is, once everyone works out that chucking money at a failing economy isn't going to work this time, what next? So we set out on day one and said, right, we're going to come up with a plan, a full economic recovery plan. And we're going to frame this around resilience, and I know we'll get a minute or two, but as a long-term social campaigner, I didn't start in the environment, I came into it. As a long-term social campaigner, I was involved in the anti-globalization movement, and then the whole Occupy post-financial crisis. And in both occasions, we just lost it because we lost the story almost immediately. Straight away in both cases, the forces of reform and progress and change were just framed out of the debate. And we suffered in both cases for a decade afterwards. Now, this time we don't want to do that. So we're producing two things now. We are framing the future as being about resilience, about social resilience, about equality, so that our society does not buckle every time it comes under duress from external factors, and that people are not living hand to mouth, and people do have resources. Economic resilience, so that our economy doesn't topple every time something happens, and environmental resilience, so that the world in which we live can still exist because our environment is resilient. So we've got two papers, they are done. The first one is a framing document, it's called Resilience Economics, and it's about pulling together a wide range of economic theories, which are all progressive economic theories. You'll be familiar with lots of them. Foundational economics is key, circular economics, sharing economy, well-being economics, so on and so on. And we assemble these into one coherent package of economic thinking, which we are calling resilience economics. We're trying to grab this quickly and saying resilience economics is how you see positive social change. Can I get 1 minute? Because I think it's probably worth telling people this. Right. The second document is called Resilience Scotland. It then says, taking this economic framing, which is a framing issue, What does that look like for an action plan? And in that document, we have 3 phases. Phase 1, straight after lockdown, some emergency stuff. I won't tell you. Phase 2, now this is from the Scottish elections to for the 4 years of that term. And in that one, what we're doing is we are doing everything we possibly can from the Common Home Plan that's possible under devolution and everything that's not possible under devolution. Quite usefully, it's all got long lead times. So we're going to use it as an incubator. By the end of that 4 years, everything must be shovel ready. Now, I don't assume everyone's an independence supporter, but we believe at that point, it's either Scottish independence or we follow through with a really major Green New Deal, or we just revert to letting Westminster lead us out of climate crisis. These reports are nearly ready for publication. I just sent the first full draft of the second one to my board for approval today. We are working on an absolutely massive campaign to get this over the line. And any of you that saw it in the National today, Joanna Cherry's already saying we need a radical approach to the future of Scotland. That we've been doing Zoom calls with groups of politicians and we're getting a very positive response to this. We are working, I mean, again, this campaign's so big, I can't even begin to tell you about it, but we are planning to have tens of thousands of people in Scotland developed and trained to back this and to support this. And we are working hard to get a large number of powerful endorsements to make sure that this has got the respectability, authority and weight that it needs. For the first time in my life, I actually believe that we might be less than 12 months away from a genuine programme of economic transformation in Scotland. I am too cynical, too long betting in this one to believe it's any sort of a done deal. It won't be. There will be a substantial fight back on anything we do. But I finish by saying I implore you all, if you want to see a Green New Deal in Scotland, help us. Help us get this over the line. Give us your support. Join the groups. Don't have to agree with every square inch of this. We can debate over whether it's solar thermal or solar PV at your leisure. In the meantime, we have got months to win or lose the future. So let's win it. Thank you.
Great.